Welcome to The Hidden Load, the podcast where we uncover the unseen weight carried by the educators and leaders in medicine and explore how to lighten it. I am Dr. Santina or Tina Wheat. I am a family physician, an educator, a leader, and a coach. Each week, we will dig into the challenges that often go unspoken, from burnout and boundaries to purpose and identity to figuring out sustainability, and share practical tools to help you move from chaos to calm and from burnout to balance. Because the hidden load does not have to be yours to carry alone, and in fact, shouldn't be. Let's get started. Welcome back to The Hidden Load, the podcast for the educators and leaders in medicine. I am your host, Dr. Santina Wheat, and I am so grateful that you are here today. This is episode number 10, Identity. Now, in our last episode, we explored the difference between burnout and moral injury. We talked about why it is so important to get our language right. Burnout and moral injury might show up with very similar symptoms. Think exhaustion and disconnection, and even the questioning of whether you want to stay in this profession. But the root causes are different. Burnout is all about depletion, and moral injury is all about violation of your core. And if we treat them as the same, then we end up prescribing the wrong solutions and we don't see improvements. But now today, we're going to pivot to something that might feel a little bit less concrete, at least at first. But it is absolutely central to how we experience and manage that hidden load. Today, we are talking about identity. Because if burnout is about energy and moral injury is about our values, then identity, it is about who we are in the midst of all of it. So I want to start by talking about the tension that many of us carry. We have the tension between that identity that is our professional identity and that identity that is our personal identity. If you are anything like me, you were told to hold those separate. Your professional self is the one that you have trained for years to embody. That is the clinician, the educator, the steady leader, whatever that title is for you. It's the part of you that knows those protocols, that follows all of the rules, and that is there to serve and care for your patients and your learners. Your personal self is different. It's the part of you that laughs at inside jokes, that loves your kids and your family fiercely. Maybe that has a hobby that has nothing to do with medicine, or that simply wants to rest. And as I already mentioned, many of us have been told by medicine that the right thing to do is to keep these identities totally separate. You need to be professional at work and don't let that home life distract you. And on the other side, don't let that work life distract you when you get home because you can't bring that stress home to your family. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Well, I think it sounds really neat on paper. But for most of us, if not all of us, the division just isn't so clean. And I would argue that when we try to force that division, in fact, it makes things worse. It makes that hidden load actually grow heavier and heavier. So, as always, I'm going to share a little bit from my own journey. When I became a mom, while also working as a physician and as an educator, I felt this constant pull. At work, I wanted to show that nothing changed. I wanted to be fully present, fully professional, and not show that I was slowed down by exhaustion or the constant pop-up of childcare challenges. I needed to do that because I didn't want to be hit by the mommy tax. I didn't want people to think that I couldn't handle things just because I had young children. At home, I tried to do the same thing. I tried to not let work creep in. I didn't want to be the mom who was always distracted by patient charts or late night emails, even though that was something that both my husband and I did, him not in medicine, but both of us feeling like we worked around the time that our kids were sleeping. And you can probably guess what happened. In both spaces, I felt split. It didn't feel good. At work, I was constantly covering up part of myself. And at home, I was suppressing a different part. And here's the key. It wasn't just tiring. It was lonely. Because if no one ever really sees your full self in any setting, then where do you feel fully known? Where do you feel fully authentic? I know that many of you listening to this probably have your own version of this story. Maybe it's because you're the first in your family to enter medicine and you're feeling the pressure to represent while still wanting to stay connected to where you came from. Maybe it's trying to lead in an academic environment while also caring for an aging parent. Maybe it's simply the tension of loving your job and loving your family and feeling like you have to prove that you can give 100% to both. Let's be honest, each one of those has been true for me. So, what's the cost of keeping those identities siloed? Particularly when I'm sure some of you have been told you have to wear your professional face, or you have to wear your mom face or your family face. Well, when we keep those identities siloed, the first challenge is that we end up feeling like imposters. Because if you're only showing part of yourself in any given space, it is easy to feel like you are pretending. Because you sort of are. Then second is we burn unnecessary energy because we're switching. We're code switching. Every time you walk into a new role, you are mentally changing costumes. And you're pushing up against this feeling. Every time you walk into a new role, you are mentally changing costumes. And as you're in that costume, you constantly feel this uncomfortable rub of the rest of you that can't be shown. And over time, that certainly takes a toll. Third, we send a message to all of those around us, our colleagues, our learners, and even our families, that being whole is just not possible in healthcare. And let me pause here. If you are a leader, this last point really matters. And before you shrug your shoulders and say, oh, I'm not a leader, often, just by being in medicine, you are a leader. Because and this really matters, because whether you mean to or not, people are always watching you for cues. If you always show up in a mask of perfection, then your learners might assume that that is the only acceptable way to be. That's what I thought. And they will carry that hidden load of pretending into their own careers. It is not just about you. It is about the culture that is all around you. And culture, that is shaped in the small everyday choices that we make about what parts of ourselves we should bring forward. So, how do we integrate our identities, particularly as a leader? Well, let's start by talking about what it's not. Integration does not mean that you are dumping your personal struggles on your team or that you are bringing your laptop to every family meal. It is not about blurring. It is not about blurring all of the boundaries that I talked to you about in a previous episode. Integration is about honesty, it's about alignment, and it's about permission. Integration is acknowledging at work when you've had a hard night at home, instead of pretending that you're fine. It is also allowing your family to celebrate your professional milestones and being there with you when you are facing your disappointments, instead of acting like work exists in a sealed box. It is about giving yourself permission to be the same human across all settings, even when the role shifts. And I'd argue, especially when the role shifts. And for the leaders and educators, integration is a form of advocacy, because when you show up authentically, you give others permission to do the same. And remember, we talked about how advocacy can be something small in a previous episode. Let me give you an example. A colleague of mine once opened a teaching session by saying, "I'm running a little slow today because I was up all night with a sick toddler. I might not be as sharp as usual, but we will get through this together." Well, what did that communicate? Did it communicate a weakness? Absolutely not. Did it communicate unprofessionalism? Also, no. It communicated humanity. It modeled that being a good doctor and being a good camp. It modeled that being a good doctor and being a good parent don't cancel each other out. That's integration, and that's leadership. I want to share how I've integrated at home with my own life. I used to think that I couldn't talk to my children. And when my children were young, sure, I didn't want to share all of the gory details. But then I started to share with them, "Oh, mom got promoted to this job," or "Mom is traveling because she's going and doing this work." And I found something really interesting. Both of my daughters were really excited to hear about my successes. And they were also amazing humans when they saw I had failures or when I had a sad thing happen with a patient. They showed up in ways that I couldn't have imagined, particularly for their ages. And they started to cut me a little bit more slack. When I shared with them what was going on, they weren't so upset when I was going on that trip or when I didn't want to do something fun because I'd had a sad day at work. It meant that they got to know me in a way that they didn't understand before. And in fact, my daughter recently commented on how cool it was to hear about the things that I was doing. And it reinforced for me that allowing that integration, that allowing all of my identities to show was really beneficial. Now, if you're wondering where to start, I'm going to share some practices that you can start with. The first is just to become aware and notice when you're splitting. Catch yourself in those moments of covering or pretending. That awareness can be so powerful. The second is to name one overlap. Share a personal story with a learner, or tell your family something about a patient encounter that moved you, of course, while protecting the patient confidentiality. Those little overlaps help. They allow you to be yourself in both places, and then connect with your core values. Ask yourself, what values run through both my professional and my personal life? For me, it's compassion, curiosity, and growth. When I anchor to those, I feel less like I'm juggling two separate lives and more like I'm living one integrated, fulfilling life. And then model imperfection and model it everywhere. Admit when you don't know something. Let your kids see you recover after a tough day. Show your team that it's possible for vulnerability and resilience to exist side by side. And as always, I want to leave you with a reframe. Today's reframe is identity integration is not unprofessional. Identity integration is human. The more that we allow our professional and personal selves to overlap, the lighter that hidden load becomes. We don't have to waste our energy hiding. Instead, we can invest that energy in leading, in teaching, and in living authentically. And so, here's my reflection question for you this week. Where in your life are you siloing your identities? And then an extra, what is one small way that you could experiment more with overlap? Maybe it's bringing a small piece of home into work. Maybe it's bringing a piece of work into a conversation at home. Maybe it's simply allowing yourself to be honest the next time someone asks you, how are you doing? I want to thank you for spending this time with me today. These conversations about identity, they're not just theoretical. They're about the daily choices that shape whether we carry that hidden load alone or whether we share it in community. Integration is not about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about alignment. It's about authenticity. It's about giving ourselves and those we lead the permission to be whole. Now, in our next episode, we're going to build on this and talk all about resilience. And I want to be clear, resilience isn't just about toughness. I am sure that you have heard others say we just need to be more resilient, and that it was said as a way to ignore systemic problems. So we're not going to talk about it that way. We will unpack what resilience really looks like, and we will talk about how we can cultivate it without falling into the trap of blame or grit at all costs. I hope to see you then. Thanks for joining me on The Hidden Load. Tag me on Instagram at Dr. Tina Wheat or email me at santina@santinawheat.com with your takeaways and ideas. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, let's lighten your hidden load.